Alright, so much for standalone documents. What about creating notebooks? Well, notebooks are really just collections of standalone documents arranged in chronological order. Let's go ahead and create a notebook and show you how that works. I'm going to click on Create and then say Notebook, and we'll go ahead and call this Algae 2 and say OK. And we now have a new empty notebook with nothing in it. So I'm going to create an entry. I think initially we'll just create a basic document as an entry, which again would just be a blank piece of paper on which I could really put anything. I could paste in some text if I like, and then I can say something like, let's give this page a name. Let's call it Day 1. And now we'll go ahead and say Save and New. We'll create a second page. And I think in this page we'll go ahead and we'll insert an Excel file that comes from my local computer. So let's see if I can find something appropriate in here. I'll pick a micro-array expression Excel and say choose and insert that. And you can see that file has now been inserted onto that page as an attachment. We'll say Day 2 and we'll say that there's an Excel in here. Now we'll go ahead and we'll create another page by saying Save and New. And this time perhaps we'll insert something a little bit more obscure, maybe a file type that the system is unlikely to recognize, perhaps a flow cytometry file. And when you ask the file to absorb a file that it doesn't recognize, there's no problem, it can certainly do that, but a lot of the time it won't really know exactly where to put it in the gallery, so we'll just put it in the miscellaneous file type section. And there we go, here's the file that's now been uploaded. This was quite a large file, so it took a moment to upload that one. We can rename this something. Let's call this page Day 3 and then say FCS to indicate there's a flow cytometry file attached and say rename. And then finally, perhaps on the final page that I'll create here for you, let's call this Day 4. Let's go ahead and insert a snip from the gallery, perhaps a snip that we made earlier. So I'm going to click Insert from Gallery, and then I'm going to navigate to my snip area, locate the snip that I looked at earlier, and if I'm not sure I can click on it to see if that's the one that I want. Yep, that's definitely the snip I'm looking for. So now I'll select it and say Insert, and now you can see we've inserted that little chunk of content that I earlier created in the standalone document that I was working with. And now I'm going to say Save and Close. And this time, when we close the notebook, we'll be taken to basically a page that shows a table of contents for the notebook that we just made with 4 pages. We can see the dates and times that we made them on, we can see the owner, and we can see the title. If I go back to the workspace, I can see the notebook that I just made, and if I click on the name of the workbook, it will open up and show me that table of contents again. But if I click on the notebook itself, it will immediately open the notebook for editing, and there's no need for me then to pick a particular entry. If I'd like to know which entry I'm on now, or if I'd like to go to a specific entry, I can click the Entries button, and it will show me the various entries that I've already created, and I can jump straight to one of those if I like. If I'd like to know more information about this file now, I can click on the Get Info button, or tell me something about that file. And if I'd like to confirm that that file has arrived safe and sound in the gallery, I can right click on there and I can say I'd like to look at the gallery, and sure enough, if we go to the Documents area, here are the 2 files that I've added to the system earlier. If I go to the Miscellaneous Files area, sure enough I can see the .fcs file that I just added, and if I like I can click on the Get Info for that particular file, and I can add a meaningful caption, something like from Tuesday's Flojo run. And those of you who know anything at all about flow cytometry know that Flojo is a popular flow cytometry software package. And then I can say Save. And now we can again return to the workspace. If we go back to our algae notebook one last time and go and look at the page where the flow cytometry file was present, and I click on the Get Info button, you'll want to immediately see that the caption that I added in the gallery appears right away on that attachment now. As well as using the entry button to jump to any particular page in the notebook that we're interested in, we can also use these arrows to move through the pages of the notebook too as well. And if we're using a mobile device, we don't even have to use the arrows, we can just use the standard swipe touch command that most mobile devices recognize. Okay, so much for adding pages that are simply just basically blank sheets. What happens if we'd like to add a notebook entry that has a little bit more pre-created structure to it? Perhaps something that would follow a structure that the PI has set up for the members of their lab. Well, RSpace can do that too. Let's go ahead and say we'd like to create a new page in our notebook, but this time we'll choose Other Document, and we see that we have some pre-created forms available to us. Let's go ahead and choose the Experiment form. When we do that, RSpace gives us a blank, empty page, but you'll see the page now is divided up into specific data entry fields, giving the page a little bit more structure. I can still give the page a name. Let's call it Day 5, and we'll even say that this is based on the experiment form, and perhaps as a tag we'll add form. When I double click on the date entry, it calls up a date editing window. I can choose a particular date and I can say save. I can now edit the next field on this page. In this case it's simply a text field. I can say today I will blah blah blah, whatever it is that I will do that's the objective of my experiments day, and I can say save. And then I can perhaps add a methodology. In this case perhaps I'll just add a file from my local computer. Perhaps I'll make this a PDF file perhaps. And I'll save this entry. And perhaps the results will just be a simple Excel file. And for a conclusion, I'm going to go ahead and add some text again. I found that blah blah blah. Okay, so now we've created a prep page that has a little bit more structure to it. And I can make these forms as simple or elaborate as I like. And I can intersperse them with just plain pages too as well. So now if I say save and close and go back to my table of contents for this notebook, you'll notice that I can see the one that was based on a form based on its custom icon that indicates that this was built using a pre-structured form. Okay, so where do structured forms come from, and how can I create my own forms that will meet the needs of my lab? In RSpace, forms are created in the My RSpace area. If I want to see a list of existing forms, I can click on List Forms, and if I like I can choose one of the forms that already exists and modify it for my needs. Alternatively, I can click on a new form by clicking on Create New Form here. Usually the first thing I like to do with a form is to add a custom icon. This will allow me to distinguish this particular form from other forms that are available. I choose an image from my local hard drive, click Submit, and now I have a custom icon for this form. Let's give this a new form. Let's call it Algae Form. To add fields, I click on the Add Field button and I choose a field type from the drop-down menu. Choosing a date field is always a good place to start. We'll call this one Date, and we'll go ahead and we'll add a minimum value and a maximum value. Being able to add validation steps like this is common during the creation of RSpace forms. Once I've created the first field, I can go ahead and click Save. And now I can go ahead and create a second field. This time let's make a simple string field. Perhaps this will correspond to an alphanumeric identification code for a particular collection site. I'll go ahead and click Save to create that field. And now I'll add a third field. This time let's add a choice field. And perhaps we'd like to give the users the option to select the water type. We'll call this field water type. And we'll make it a multiple choice field. And we'll add 3 possible responses. Fresh, salt, and brackish. For the fourth and final field, let's just go ahead and create a simple text field that will allow the user to put anything they want in there. We'll call this field comments, and for the default text we'll say write comments here. If we're happy with the form we've just created with these 4 new fields, we can go ahead and say publish. We can make the field available to anybody we want, and then we can go ahead and say save and close. Once you're happy with your form, you can return to the workspace, and you can invoke the form by clicking on Create and then Other Document, navigating to the page where the form is located, and then choosing the form you just made. You can invoke this form either as a document within the workspace itself, or you can also invoke it as a page within a notebook. Give your form a name to represent the new version that you'll be invoking, and then enter the data as we've done before. Once you've entered the data in the page, you always have the option to go ahead and save that page now as a template. So what's the difference between a template here and a form? Well, a form is the blank version that has no data in it, and a template in this case would be the form along with any data that's actually included in the form itself. So here we can choose fresh water in our choice area, and then when it comes to the text field we can paste in whatever we like. So let's paste in some text here and make sure that everything looks good, and then go ahead and click save. And now if we like, we can save this entire form along with the content inside as a template. So we'll say that this is algae form with data, and you even get to choose which of the various data fields you'd like to keep inside the template. Let's just keep all of them and say OK. And now if we like, we can go back to the workstation and we can say create from template. The system automatically then takes us to the gallery, and we can see in there the template that we just created. We can say create document, and it will make a new document based on the template that we earlier saved along with all the data. Now you can do this anywhere in RSpace. You can actually create templates from pretty much any page. Templates are pages that have data in them. Forms are structured documents that don't yet have any data in them. And snips are just small pieces of content that you could save at any time so that you can reuse just that one piece of content. And you can make snips from virtually any text or any combination of text, images and other content on any page. Now that we've looked at the basics of the user interface, and we've looked at ways to create content and to manage that content using templates, snips and forms, let's go ahead and look at some more advanced features. Let's imagine that I'd like to share a document with one of my colleagues. How can I do that in RSpace? Let's go ahead and select a document in our workspace, for example a document called algae DNA, and then I'll go ahead and click the share button to bring up the sharing dialog box. I can use that sharing dialog box to select who I'd like to share this document with. I can choose to share it with my entire lab group, which is called day group, or I can pick a user from within that lab group. In this case, I'm going to choose Rob Day 2. I select that name in the list and I set the edit privileges to edit so that my colleague can edit this document. Then I click on the share button. Now I'm going to move part of my Safari window out of the way to reveal underneath it a different browser. This is Firefox, and I'm going to log into this window as RD user 2, whose real name is Rob Day 2. Once I've logged into the system, I can see that I've received a notification. When I open up that notification, I can see that it contains a link to the document that was just shared with me. When I click on that link, the system automatically loads up the document that was just shared with me. Since I have edit privileges, I can go ahead and I can start to edit this document if I want. I'm going to just type in the single word edit, and I'm going to select that word, and I'm going to change the color of that word to red so that it stands out. Now I'm going to choose Save and Close. If I now go back to back to Safari, and I open up that document again as RD user, the original owner, you can see that I can see that edit that I've just made. And I can make additional edits from here if I want. I'm going to add the word edit 2. And this time I'm going to select some of that text and I'm going to change the color to a garish sky blue so that we can distinguish it from the previous edit. If I go back to RD user 2's interface and I again attempt to edit that document, you'll see that I'm not able to. The system is smart enough to know that RD user 1 is currently editing the document and has edit lock, and therefore won't allow me to do any more edits at this time. So I'm going to click OK here. Then I'm going to go back to RD user 1's interface and I'm going to say Save and Close. That saves the edits that I've made and it releases the edit lock. If I now refresh this page, we can see that once again RD user 2 can edit the page and make additional changes. At any time, RD user 1, that's the person who first created this shared document, can go into their My RSpace area and they can see a list of their currently shared records, and they can see the one record that they currently are sharing with their colleague. If I like, I can go ahead and either change the permissions with which I'm sharing that document, or I can just immediately unshare it. Once I've done that, RD user 2 has no further access to that document at this time. It's important to understand that in RSpace, when you first join the system, you can only share things with people who are members of your lab. If I go to my profile page and then go ahead and click on the name of my lab group, I can see that I'm the PI of a particular lab and then I have 6 other members that I can share things with. As a PI, if I like, I can add additional members to my lab. You'll notice that the invitation is sent to the person that I just invited, and once they've approved that invitation, then they'll officially be part of my lab. If you don't belong to a lab when you first join RSpace, you won't be able to share with anybody. So it's important to make sure that some of your users are PIs so that they can select you and bring you into their lab, which will allow you to share items with each other. If you want to share things with people who belong to a different lab, you can do that too, but only with the explicit permission of your PI. You'll have to ask your PI to establish a collaboration relationship with a lab that you'd like to share something with. The PI will then go ahead and click on their message button and send what's called a collaboration invitation to a different PI so that that PI can form an official relationship with your lab. If you want to know more about some of the details of these sharing relationships, those are available in a separate video. If at any time you'd like to see a summary of who has shared things with you, you can go ahead and click on the Shared folder inside your workspace, which is always present by default. Inside that folder you'll see 3 subfolders. You'll see the names of any labs that you belong to. If you're a PI, you can see user folders for the people who belong to your lab so that you can watch their work. Alternatively, if you're not a PI, you can click also on collaboration groups to see which groups you belong to outside of your lab. And you can also click on individual share items to see if there are any items that are shared exclusively between you and one of your colleagues. If you're having difficulty understanding why you can't share with a particular individual, go ahead and look at the directory. You may be able to get a hint from looking at the list of usernames, the labs that they belong to, and understanding exactly who is the PI of which lab. For more information about sharing between individuals in the same lab, or about sharing between individuals in different labs, as well as about forming collaboration groups between different labs or even across entire universities, please go ahead and review the available documentation from RSpace, or watch the entire video that deals with this subject separately on YouTube. The last thing I'd like to talk to you about today is signing your work. Signing is important because it helps you to establish the accuracy and authenticity of your work and helps you to avoid painful legal disputes or ownership questions in the future. As an example, let's go ahead and look at the document called Algae DNA that we've considered before. If I look at this document now and I consider that this work is a complete and accurate record of my work, and I'd like to lock this document for further editing, I can do so at any time. First of all, I go ahead and click Save and View. I can only sign a document that's in view mode. I can't sign it while it's being edited. I go ahead and click on the Sign button to initiate the signing process. As a PI, I may not necessarily feel like I need any witnesses, so I can skip that step if I like and just simply lock the document for editing. This might also be appropriate for locking a document like a protocol that I simply don't need anybody else to change in the future. If, however, I'd like a witness for my work, I can go ahead and click the button that says, I affirm that this document is a true and accurate description of my work performed by me on the dates indicated in the system records. The system automatically populates this list with a list of people who are qualified to see this document. Typically, this consists of other people who have access to it. By default, PIs in my group already have access to this document, and this includes my co-PI Wolfgang Rumpf. In fact, he's the only person who can currently see this document, so he's the only person who can witness it. I'll go ahead and select his name and say sign, and then the system asks me for my usual login name and password. I enter that as usual, and I go ahead and click proceed. Once I've done that, I get a notification telling me that the document has been signed and locked successfully, and I see a new indication showing me that this document has been locked for editing. Let's go ahead now and see what Wolfgang sees when he gets a notification that this document has requested him as a witness. So now I'm going to log in as my colleague and co-PI Wolfgang Rumpf. And when I do that, I can see that my workspace looks a little bit different now because Wolfgang has different content in his workspace. But I can also see that I've received a notification from the system telling me something. When I click on that notification, I see that it's a witness record signing request that comes from Rob Day. If I click on the link embedded in that notification, it will open the document for me so that I can see it. Assuming that the content of this document is satisfactory for me now, I can go ahead and click the witness button and it will bring up the witness dialog box. I can choose to decline witnessing if I wish. Typically it would be polite to give some sort of reason explaining why the work is incomplete or inaccurate, but in this case I'm going to go ahead and agree to sign this work. So I check the box that says that I will verify that this work is accurate, and then I click on the witness button. I then enter my username and password, and I click proceed. And then I try again with the correct username and password. And the system will take a while to register that this item has been witnessed now, and eventually the screen will clear and I'll see that the item has indeed been witnessed and locked so that it can't be further edited. There we go. Once the witness process has finished, I get a notification telling me so. I can click OK, and now I can see that this document is witnessed, and I get a statement telling me that the document has been signed and logged by Rob Day. If I log out as Wolfgang and I log back in as myself again, I can see that I'll receive a notification telling me that Wolfgang has witnessed the document, and I can dismiss that notification if I like. And then if I try to open up the signed document for editing again, I'll get a warning telling me that it's been locked and witnessed by Wolfgang and that I can't edit the document any further. The only other feature that I haven't said much about today is the search tool that's available through the search bar on the right hand side of the interface. You can enter simple search terms here just like you might in Google, or if you prefer, you can choose one of the search parameters to look for a specific variable within your notebook. Perhaps the most interesting one is the chemical structural search tool that allows you to search for particular molecular structures. If you prefer, you can also perform an advanced search where you can combine multiple parameters together to form a more complex search query. Our search tool also supports the Lucene structured query language, and if you'd like to know more about that, please consult the documentation from RSpace. This concludes today's run-through of the RSpace ELN product. We do hope that you found it useful. The run-through is designed to be used in conjunction with the RSpace guidance document that's available from RSpace. If you don't currently have that document, you can download it from the URL at the bottom of your screen. Additionally, do check out the other YouTube videos that are available on this channel. Many of them delve into more specialized aspects of the RSpace ELN system in much greater detail than we've seen here today. Thank you for attending, and we hope you found this product useful and enjoyable to use.